Joining.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. As Kent alluded, we're going to go through some SafetyNet 101. So my agenda for today is to really focus on how to add and edit the entities within SafetyNet. I have listed here the main entities that you would see within SafetyNet. Our broad language covers them as company, contact, and project, but many of you may be more familiar or have taken advantage of the fact that we can customize this to your language. So just I wanted to take a second to do a quick level setting on those entities. And I'm going to actually jump down to the project. Typically what we see people customizing that label to is a location. So when you start your observation process, this is where you're choosing that first drop-down box of where am I today. Right. The second drop-down box, or really with that company label, is where you focus on, who am I observing? This could be that observed party, a company, a subcontractor, a department, right? So you might see some of those labels changes. And then usually we do see contact acting as contact, but if you have any questions about what I'm referring to as we go through this, please reach out to Kent or your process improvement leader after the call, because we want to make sure that this is clear for your organization. So we're going to start with how to add and edit those entities, and then we're going to jump into some basic reports. So I have a few reports listed here. Depending on time, we might be able to get through one or two more, but these are really the main four that we see a lot of people interacting with on a regular basis. So let's get started. The very first part of SafetyNet is kind of logging in, right? The ability to add and edit one of those entities. You would need to log in using one of your browsers. Keep in mind that we do support multiple different browser types, but you would put in that URL. Usually it's your company name, .predictivesolutions.com. Notice there is no www in front of that. So if you ever get tripped up, that's usually one of the first things we hear about. And that should bring you to a login screen. This login information is the exact same stuff that you would have on your mobile device. So your username, typically we see first initial, last name, and then your password. If you've lost your password or forgotten your password, you can definitely use that lost your password link and go ahead and change that pretty quickly. So from here, I'm actually going to jump into more of a live version of SafetyNet. And we're going to go through some of the quick ways to navigate through the system. So once you log in, you should be automatically brought to your dashboard screen. There's a lot of information that's kind of presented in front of you. For today's session, we're really going to focus on these top menu items. So you can see here those entities that we were referring to, companies, contacts, and projects. And each one of those has a drop-down menu that talks about adding or finding, which will give you the ability to edit. One of the quick ways that we've developed to navigate to those items is actually located on your dashboard. So many of the organizations that we do business with have hundreds, if not thousands, of a specific company, of different companies or different projects, and it can take some time to load all that information if you were to go to these find links. So our recommendation is to actually use this quick links that's located on the left-hand side of your dashboard. To find a specific item, you would just click into the box of the entity type that you're looking for and begin typing. As soon as you're done kind of putting in that little bit of search criteria, you can either hit enter or click on the arrow and it'll bring you to that find screen and it'll already have it filtered down to your search criteria. Keep in mind when you search for contacts This is searching by the contact's last name. So if you wanted to look for somebody, their first name was Emma, you would not type in Emma here. You would use the first few letters of her last name. So let's go ahead and get started with how to add a new company. And I wanted to start here mostly because it is one of the more basic entities that we can add. There's not a lot of steps to it. I'm going to click on this Add a New Company, and you'll see that it just gives us a very clear outline as to what we need to add. Anything that's marked in red is a required field, and anything not marked in red is really supplemental fields, things that we would recommend that you would put in, but if not, it's not necessary for for anything to work within SafetyNet. So I'm going to go ahead and just type in a company name, and then click on Save Entire Page. Once I click on Save Entire Page, notice the page does refresh, and it allows me to do some additional things with this company. Up on the top, you can see 5 main tabs. Currently, we're on this Details tab. If I scroll down, it gives me the ability to enter in specific things about this company, so more than just what region do they work within, or their company website, but do they have multiple locations? And I can edit this information or add additional locations. Same thing with adding contacts. If you think about this in a use case scenario, a construction company might be working, a general contractor might have subcontractors that they're going to be observing. And on a regular basis, you would want to send that safety director a report. This is where you would add that specific safety director's contact information so that he could receive automatic emails through SafetyNet. So we'll go through this piece in just another minute, but let's go through the rest of how to add a company. When we think about first adding a company, we have these details about that entity, but we don't know if we're supposed to be observing them yet. So we do need or do want to go to this additional tab, which is called Projects here, where we can associate this company to a project to be observed. In most cases, we see them as the contractor or crew. So I'm going to click on this secondary link, and then I would click on the Add to Project. By following through this second step, once again, just to reiterate, this now allows our end users to go to a specific project and observe this new company. So I selected the project, I added to basket, and now I can click on Finish. So that's what we know about a company. Like I said, typically we're found on the contractor crews for the associations, and the only things that we need to put into the system are the items that are marked in red. Your organization might have a few more items listed in that required section, so just be aware of that. Now, to add a contact, instead of going back to the home page, which is where we were earlier, I can use these drop-down menus and just continue to work throughout SafetyNet. So I don't have to go back to step 1. I can go to the drop-down menu and click on Add Contact. Adding a contact does get a little bit more complicated. Typically, contacts are added to the system because they're going to be the observer, right? So this is a 2-step process. The first thing that we have to put into the system is obviously their contact details. What's their first name? What's their last name? Right. Here we can see, once again, that this is the only required field with the exception of the company. So once again, we do have to associate to that company. I use the type ahead functionality to just click in the box, and then it gives me some options that match my criteria. Once I've added that company, it does require me to add a location. Keep in mind when we were talking about adding that company, we could have multiple locations. The use case for this is really around kind of those subcontractors again. If we add a subcontractor company, they have multiple locations across the country. I want to know specifically, where does Teresa work for? Some additional supplemental fields that you would want to take advantage of within SafetyNet is potentially this position. If I'm going to become an observer for you, I may want to later on understand if I'm part of safety, if I'm a field observer, right, if I'm doing peer-to-peer observations. So what level am I in the organization so that I can set goals specific to my position, for example. That's usually a beneficial field. We also want you to fill out the email address so that we can send those automatic emails. And if I don't have an email address for myself, I'm unable to automatically send. But once again, as soon as I fill out those required fields, I can save entire page. And then the screen did change a little bit. I want to scroll down. This is really important to this two-step process. Once again, if I'm going to be an observer for our company, I need to first go to this flag matrix. Each of our companies are automatically set up with a standard flag matrix, and that's where I currently sit. I can show my flag matrix to see what that standard is. Here we can see a long list of different checklists that we have in the system, whether or not I'm an inspector or should be receiving alerts or any of those automated emails. But my standard my standard for my organization is to only be associated with safety. If I have a deviation from that, I would need to change this flag status to custom, where I can then pick and choose which boxes to check. So once I select that, the boxes are no longer grayed out, and I can start to manipulate where those check boxes belong. Anytime that we make changes to a screen, we would want to scroll back up and make sure that we click on Save Entire Page. So now that I know that I am an observer on these specific checklists, sorry about that. So once that I know that I'm an observer on these specific checklists, I do need to be associated to projects. So that's that second step. Where am I allowed to go out and do those observations? So I'll click on the Projects tab. And here I'm going to default to that Team Members tab, and this is usually where we see those contacts, right? As an observer, I need to be added as a team member to do those observations. Exact same process that we went through earlier. I would add to project, select the projects that I need to be observing, click on Add to Basket. Scroll down to the bottom of the screen and select Finish. My page refreshes and lets me know I'm now associated. The other use case for adding a contact, kind of going back to what we were doing on the setup of a company, is I'm not going to be an observer for you, but I do need to receive reports. In that particular case, I would be still adding all of these associations, including adding myself as team members, but I would be changing out this flag status. So going back to maybe I don't work directly for you, but I want a none, but I'm in the system. My email is in the system. You can quickly pull me up and send me stuff. All right. The last setup process, so kind of adding a new project, this is just a little even more complicated than the process that we just went through with a contact, but it walks you through these steps. Okay, so here on the left-hand side, you can see very quickly that these are the number of steps that we have to go through in order to set up a new project. In many cases, the easiest option here is to copy an existing project. So as you've become a SafetyNet user, you were probably just on another project, you have another one coming up that's very similar, or you have multiple projects that are very similar. I would go ahead and click on that copy an existing project link. This allows you to select a new project title. I can copy from a specific project using either the type ahead functionality or that browse link. Once I've selected that project, notice it does bring up all the general information about that existing project. So here we can see project title, what region they're associated with, etc. As we move through these steps, keep in mind that we can edit this information. So it's not going to copy everything about this project, it's just giving you a reference point. So I'm going to select Create Project, and it's going to bring me to that next step. Because I've copied from an existing project, you can see here that I already have a whole list of team members. So instead of adding just new, I can quickly change this list by saying, nope, I only need, I can delete a few people by putting a check mark in the box to the left of their name, scrolling all the way down to the bottom of the list, and clicking on Delete. If I need to add a few more people, I would go ahead and click on the Add Contacts. It would pull up that picker window where I could then select my additional observers. Once we get this team members list to the place that we need it to be, we would scroll all the way down, and this is a long list, and then click on Continue. It brings us to that next tab of associating, well, who am I observing? And once again, we can see that the list of companies has already been associated. And I can walk through that same process of deleting those that are no longer pertinent or adding additional companies to this listing. Once I see that this list is completed, I can scroll all the way down and click on Continue once more. Now this is where I would start editing some of the additional information about this project. So it's already pulled over and copied from that original project, the owner information, but maybe the owner has changed. That address has probably changed, so I would be able to just click into these boxes and make those changes. And if I continue to scroll down, you can see some additional fields that we would be able to edit. One of the items that is important to keep in mind, even though it's not a required field, is this project status. In order for projects to show up on a mobile device, it does need to be set to current. So if we happen to have copied from an on hold or a completed project, we would need to change this to a current project for people to begin doing their inspections and observations. Once we're satisfied with the setup, I would click on Done. It does bring me to a summary page where I can then create another project, go specifically to this project, or go back to the home page. I'm going to go to the home page just to show you quickly how to edit any of these entities. That is something that we get some questions on a regular basis, so it potentially might not be completely intuitive, but just like we did on that project screen when we copied over, we can click into any of those boxes to edit the information. So I'm going to quickly search for a contact. Maybe they've changed their last name. Go ahead and click on that arrow. Notice that it brings me to the same screen that I would have been brought to if I would have used this drop-down menu, only it's already been filtered by the last name. I can scroll down and see the results of my search. And then to edit, I would click on either the first name or the last name to get to that general tab that we filled out earlier. And here I can click into the box and make those changes. Keep in mind we need to save entire page. So you can do this on all of the entities that we just reviewed by using that Find option and then clicking into these boxes to make your changes. So let's get on to some more fun stuff. So once you guys start collecting observations, it's really important to start understanding some of the basic reports that are available. This drop-down menu can be pretty intimidating, so I want to give you some idea on why this list is as long as it is. So if you think about this in terms of your people collect observations, and we just roll it up to these different entity types by filtering it out in a couple of different ways, right? So if you think about if I wanted to look at my questions, my categories and subcategories, I would navigate to the summary report. If I want to see how many observations my observers are doing, I would go to the observer summary report. Similar to the project and the contractor. So let's go ahead and start with the summary report. Like I said, this is going to list out all of your questions, those categories and subcategories, and give us the associated details. At the top of the screen is a pretty big criteria section. I can start to filter this information by the inspection date is a key one, which inspection types I want to use. Maybe I'm only for one region. So I would be able to start to filter this information based on my needs. As I scroll down, we'll get to the results. The top two graphs are really just trying to display our at-risk counts and our percentage, our at-risk percentage. The one on the left is per category, and the one on the right is just that trend over the last year. We also have the quick links to save this chart to your dashboard. So if you find this chart particularly interesting and you want to make sure that we're reviewing it on a regular basis or every time you log in, you would be able to quickly save chart to home page and have it displayed there. As I continue to scroll down, we can see the next section is really a summary. So from the filter criteria that I used at the top of the screen, how many inspections, how many observations, what is the breakdown of those severities that I've seen? And then the bottom section really lists out those questions, those categories and subcategories on your checklist. By clicking on any one of these header items, I can resort this information. Notice my page refreshed as soon as I clicked on that column. And now I can see that safe conditions are descending order based on the number. So based on how you want to look at this information, you might want to understand, well, where am I finding the most at-risk conditions? Click on the column header, and now we have it resorted. If I need to understand more about what exactly happened in a particular question, so proper use of ladder, for example. Here we've only seen it at risk 26 times, but our percentage is at 38.5%. That concerns me. I want to take a closer look at it. I can quickly click on proper use of ladder and say, well, what do I need to know about this? Do I want to know what projects this is happening on or which contractors have these observations? Or do I need to know the details? So as soon as you click one of those radial buttons, the information will start to download and present itself. The details report is a really nice view of all of those detailed at-risk items first. So here I can quickly see any thumbnails of photos, any comments that were made. Has everything been completed? Similar to the previous screen, I can click on any one of these column headers and the information will resort itself. So if I want to know, not based on project information or project name, but has everything been completed, I can click on that. The page will refresh and it will present itself in a different way. If you need to take a closer look at any of the photos, you would be able to click up on it. You can see it downloading here on the bottom of my screen, and I can get a bigger view of that. Another way to look at the summary report is to understand what are we not looking at in the field. So maybe these are some of our most at-risk conditions that we view and we observe, but what am I not looking at? What am I missing? By scrolling back up, you'll see that a lot of our reports have both a basic and an advanced tab. That is really just changing the criteria section. So by clicking on that advanced tab, I now have even more options to start to filter this data by. And I can see this show items not inspected. Just by checking that box and clicking on Run Reports, I can now see all of my zeros. So if I scroll back down, resort this information, it'll show me the zeros at the top. Or if I continue to scroll all the way down to the bottom, which I know that this looks horrible on your screen, but you'll start to see those zeros. Okay. So that's another great way to use the summary report to understand what are we looking at and what are we not looking at. Let's jump over to the Observer Summary Report. This report, like I said earlier, is all of the observations, but now it's grouping by our observers. So I'm understanding how many times did they do an inspection, how many observations have they had. At the top, we have a criteria section that looks very similar to the one that we were previously at. I can change that inspection date, what specific projects. And similar to that summary report, it may be very important to me to understand not only who's observing, but who's not observing. So just by checking that box, I could now understand who's not doing their observations. As I scroll down, I can see my results. Just like on the summary report, I can click any of the column headers to resort the information. I can also use some grid tools. This is something that Scott Collarosi will go over in more detail next week, but if you're not finding some interesting metrics on your observer, for example, instead of left-clicking on a column header to sort the information, I can right-click, and it gives me a menu to start to manipulate this data. One of the places that we see a lot of people using is this additional columns. So maybe I need to understand how many comments for our at-risks are being observed. So I could quickly add that column just by selecting and dragging and adding it to my visible field section and then choosing apply. So here now we can see that Bill Murray has had 4 at-risk observations with comments. Many of you also have this inspector percentile. I highly encourage you to contact your process improvement leader with any questions that you have on this field. This is a really great way to understand the quality of the observations that your observers are putting into the system, but we want to make sure that you're informed on how this works, what components go into it, and how to treat this data once we start using it. So 2 additional reports that I think are fairly basic but give a lot of information is, so I'm going to start with the Find Inspection screen. A lot of our customers set goals and expectations for our observers, and they specifically use this observer summary report on a regular basis, whether it be weekly or monthly, to understand are people meeting their expectations. And a lot of phone calls that we receive back is that Joe Smith says that he did his observations, but he's not showing up on my observer summary reports. This is a great place to go to understand what has or has Joe Smith not done for us. So just by clicking on that Find Inspection, I can now scroll down. Similar to the rest of our reports, I can search by a specific person or navigate into different parts of the inspection dates or regions. But if you're not currently using this system date, I would also encourage you to talk to your process improvement leader about getting that turned on. One of the things that we capture when someone starts an observation is that inspection date and time. We also capture the system date, meaning when did they synchronize this information to us. So Joe Smith may have done his observations but forgot to synchronize his device to us in a timely manner. So by using this report, we can understand why, yes, he did them, but why he didn't show up on the observer summary report. This screen should also be familiar to a lot of you because this is where we would go to edit our inspection or to display a single inspection report. All right, the last report that I want to go over is the project summary report. This is one of my personal favorite reports because we can do a lot with it, and there's a lot of information that displays on it. Starting out just like the rest of our reports, we have a criteria section that's at the top of the page. It's the same observation information, now just grouped by our projects. And we can quickly see that we have this one sorted by the number of at-risk. So we can see kind of that summary of how many inspections were done in this time frame, how many at-risks. That index percentile displays here as well. But as an example, we have, if you have additional questions on a specific project, so let's say Atomium, for example, I need to know, they're red flagged, which is concerning, which I'll talk about in just a minute. They have the most at risk. Their percentage of at risk is fairly high. So I need to know some additional details. By clicking on the View Analysis link, I can get that summary report for just that specific project and the time frame in which we searched by. So it gives me an understanding of what are we looking at, what are we not looking at, what has the trend been over the last 12 months, the specific details of those questions. And if I scroll all the way down, it's going to also give me a listing of our observed parties. So those companies that we're observing, and where do they fall? So this page kind of gives us that one quick overview of everything that's happening on a project. Where are we seeing the biggest concern? What specific categories or subcategories should we be looking at? And then one step further as to which companies should we be going to have those conversations with. I'm actually going to use the back arrow, which is not something that we use a lot within SafetyNet. It does require you to reload a page, so sometimes it will require you to kind of resubmit that form. But this is a good place to do this in. On the project summary report, it will bring you back to that previous screen really well. Now you'll notice here that we have a ton of red flags. I'm not sure if everyone on the call is familiar with our predictive analytics, but this is where we display any of those locations or projects that have a high likelihood of an incident over the next 30 days. I can click up on that red flag to get a little bit more understanding around why was this particular project red flagged, and you can see a few of our safety truths are being displayed here. If I continue to scroll down, you can also see that we have a feedback section. So do you agree? Do you strongly agree? Is there any additional information that you see about this project that maybe Predictive Solutions should be considering? I can also click on this for more information, click here. And this gives me specifics around why did we identify those particular safety truths. So if I move this screen out of the way for a second, we can see that we have 3 safety truths. Safety truth number 1 is too few inspectors. We go so far as to show you what did we mean by that safety truth, and here is your specific trend for too few inspections. We also go on to give you some suggested actions. So if this is the safety truth that was identified, here are some additional steps that we would recommend for you. So keep in mind, a lot of SafetyNet has to do with continuing to click through items. Anything that's underlined when we hover over it, you can select, and it'll give you additional details about that specific entity or that information that's being displayed. So from a high level, this is really what I wanted to present today. If you have additional questions or need additional assistance, please feel free to reach out to your process improvement leader. Now would be a great time to ask questions as well. We have additional resources on top of this. So if you go to our Learning Center, this is actually on SafetyNet. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a user resources link. And this is that link that will bring you there where we have a ton of user guides and videos that can actually walk you through a lot of the items that we talked about today, as well as our technical support staff.
Great, fantastic, Teresa. Very informative information here today. As Teresa mentioned, we do have a chat function. You know, if you want to ask questions at the top right-hand corner of the screen, we can entertain questions for the next few minutes as well. So feel free to go ahead and use that function and send it over to us, and we'll read those to everybody. As we're typing that, I just also want to, again, remind you that these webinars are all being recorded and also posted on predictivesolutions.com, so you can take a look at those. I will send them out as well in a few days or so. So you'll have this recording coming to your email box as a link, or if this meeting was sent to you from somebody else before to somebody else, I'm sending it to our main key contacts in the that we talk to folks at the various companies, and if they forward the meeting request, you can get the recording from them in a few days. So look out for that. So I don't see any questions coming in. So thank you so much for, oh, here we go, we do have one. You talked about observations being synchronized with your system. Can you explain how that happens? Teresa, take that.
Sure. So observations that are captured on the mobile device is actually done on an offline application, so you don't need to have that Wi-Fi connection or that data connection. So if you're in a remote location, you can still continue and complete your observations. However, once you've completed that observation, right, it's still just stuck on your device, your mobile device. So there is an act of actually synchronizing that needs to take place where the information gets pushed to the cloud and up to, your reports. Now, depending on what type of mobile device you're using, I would encourage you to, go to this user resources and choose one of our user guides that are specific to either the iOS or the Android devices.
Great. Hopefully that helps answer that question. I don't see any others coming in. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you next month, next webinar. And it won't be a webinar in October because that'll be our customer conference. So we're taking a break for that, but certainly coming up to Nashville. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.